I'm Nancy, 32 female. I live in a modest suburban house that my husband Richard and I bought 5 years ago, back when dreams felt more affordable. I work as an archivist for the city, a job I love for its quiet solitude and the sense of order it brings. But the order in my life was about to be systematically dismantled by the one person I thought was my partner in building it. This is the story of how a lie about a plane ticket revealed a web of deceit, and how my dying grandmother gave me the power to burn that web to the ground. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning, the kind of gray, listless day that felt heavy with unspoken anxieties. On the other end of the line was my aunt, her voice thin and strained, cracking over the 3,000 miles that separated us. "Nancy," she began, and I knew from her tone that the news wasn't good. "It's about your grandmother. The doctors, they don't think she has much time left. A few weeks, maybe a month if we're lucky." A cold dread seeped into my bones, chilling me more than the autumn air outside. My grandmother, Margaret, was more than just a relative. She was the anchor of my childhood, the keeper of my secrets, and the source of my strength. She was 86, a formidable woman who had built a successful catering business from nothing, raising 3 kids on her own after my grandfather passed away young. Her hands, though now frail and spotted with age, had once kneaded dough, signed contracts, and wiped away my tears with equal tenderness. The thought of her light dimming, of a world without her in it, was unbearable. "I need to come see her," I said immediately, my voice thick with emotion. "I'll book a flight for this weekend." That evening, I sat down with Richard to discuss the plan. He was sitting at the dining table, scrolling through spreadsheets on his laptop, a deep frown creasing his brow. As a management consultant, he was always optimizing, streamlining, and analyzing synergies. Our life often felt like another project he was managing, complete with budgets and performance reviews. "Honey," I started, trying to keep my voice steady. "I spoke with my aunt today. Grandma Margaret, she's not doing well. The doctors are saying it's the end of the road. I need to go home and see her one last time." Richard looked up from his screen, his expression shifting from focused to a well-practiced mask of sympathy. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose, a gesture he always used before delivering bad news. "Oh, Nance, I'm so sorry to hear that. That's awful." He got up, walked around the table, and put his hands on my shoulders, giving them a gentle squeeze. It was a gesture that was supposed to be comforting, but it felt rehearsed and hollow. "I was looking at flights," I continued, pushing past the feeling of unease. "They're expensive, around $900 for a round trip, but I can put it on the credit card and we can pay it off over the next couple of months. It's important." He sighed, a long, theatrical exhalation of air. "Nancy, we just can't afford it right now." He walked back to his laptop and turned the screen towards me. On it was our joint budget spreadsheet, a sea of numbers and color-coded cells. He pointed to a line highlighted in red. "Look. The property tax bill was higher than we expected, the car needed new brakes, and my commission check last month was smaller than usual. We are stretched so thin, we're barely breaking even." His voice was calm, logical, and utterly convincing. He made our financial situation sound dire, a house of cards teetering on the verge of collapse. Tossing another $1,000 on the credit card right now would be irresponsible. It could put us in a really bad spot. I stared at the numbers, feeling a wave of guilt wash over me. He was the financial expert, the one who managed our money. I trusted him completely. If he said we couldn't afford it, who was I to argue? Still, a desperate plea rose in my throat. "But Richard, this is my grandmother. It's the last time I might ever get to see her. We can eat rice and beans for a month. I'll pick up extra hours cataloging the new archives. We can make it work." He shook his head slowly, his expression a perfect blend of pity and paternal firmness. "It's not just about this month, honey. It's about the long term. Being financially responsible means making tough choices. It's what adults have to do." He framed it as a sacrifice they were both making, a hardship they were enduring together for the sake of their future. He made it sound noble. I know it's hard to hear, he added, his voice softening. And I feel terrible. Why don't you schedule a long video call with her? It's not the same, I know. But you can see her and talk to her. We can send a beautiful bouquet of flowers. We'll show her we're thinking of her. Defeated, I nodded numbly. The logic was sound, the reasoning impeccable. We were a team, and sometimes the team had to make sacrifices. I pushed down the raw, searing grief and the desperate need to hold my grandmother's hand one last time, replacing it with a sense of grim responsibility. I was an adult. This was an adult decision. Over the next 2 weeks, I lived in a haze of sorrow and regret. I had long, tearful video calls with Grandma Margaret. She was frail, her voice a reedy whisper, but her eyes were still sharp and full of love. She never once mentioned my absence, never made me feel guilty, which somehow made it worse. I could see the disappointment in my aunt's face every time we spoke, the unspoken question hanging in the air, "Why aren't you here?" I explained our financial situation, parroting Richard's words about responsibility and tough choices. I felt ashamed, like I was letting my grandmother down in her final days because of a car repair and a tax bill. Richard, meanwhile, was the model of a supportive husband. He'd rub my back when I cried after a call, order my favorite takeout, and talk about all the wonderful things we'd do once we're back on our feet. A week later, he came home with news. "Hey, so listen. Greg and a couple of the guys are going on a little trip next weekend, just a quick guys thing. Super cheap. We're driving down to a cabin a few hours away, splitting gas, bringing our own food, just a weekend to decompress. You know how stressful work has been." I barely registered it. "Oh, okay, honey, have fun." "It's really a nothing trip," he emphasized. "Greg's uncle is letting us use the place for free. It'll probably cost less than $100 for the whole weekend. I just need a break, you know." "I know," I said, my mind still thousands of miles away in a sterile hospital room. "You deserve it." He seemed relieved that I didn't protest, that I didn't question the timing or the expense, however small he claimed it to be. He kissed my forehead, a quick, dismissive peck, before retreating to his office to finalize some reports. The lie was laid, the foundation for the betrayal cemented, and I, in my grief-stricken state, was completely oblivious. The weekend Richard left for his cheap cabin trip was one of the longest of my life. The house felt cavernously empty, each creak of the floorboards amplifying my loneliness and anxiety. I spent most of Saturday on a video call with my grandmother. She was barely conscious, her breath a shallow rattle in her chest. I read to her from her favorite book of poetry, my voice breaking on every line, knowing she likely couldn't hear me but needing to do it anyway. My aunt held the phone, her face a grim portrait of exhaustion and sorrow. The call ended when a nurse came in to administer more morphine. I hung up and wept until my body ached. Richard sent a few texts. "Hey honey, cabin is rustic but nice, hope you're holding up." Later, "Just finished a hike, thinking of you." They were the bare minimum of communication, breadcrumbs of affection designed to keep me from feeling suspicious or neglected. I replied with simple okays and "you too," too drained to offer anything more. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband, the man who held my hand at my father's funeral and promised to always be my rock. His story was plausible, his concern, I thought, was genuine. The $100 budget trip was a small respite for him from the stress of work and the gloom that had descended upon our home. On Sunday evening, I was curled up on the sofa, scrolling aimlessly through my phone, a mindless distraction from the gnawing dread in my stomach. I rarely used Instagram, but my thumb paused on a notification. Greg has posted for the first time in a while. Greg was Richard's friend, the one who had supposedly arranged the cabin trip. Out of mild curiosity, I tapped on his profile. It was public. The first photo hit me like a physical blow. It was a group shot of 4 men on the deck of what was unmistakably a yacht. They were all grinning, holding up glasses of champagne, the setting sun painting the sky behind them in fiery shades of orange and pink. The water was a brilliant turquoise, and in the background, a lush, mountainous coastline rose from the sea. In the center of the group, beaming with a carefree joy I hadn't seen on his face in years, was my husband, Richard. He was tan, wearing expensive-looking linen shorts and a designer polo shirt. This was not a rustic cabin a few hours' drive away. This was paradise, and it was a paradise built on a lie. My breath hitched in my chest. I couldn't process it at first. It had to be a mistake, an old photo. I clicked on it. The caption read, "Living the dream in Cabo, what a weekend with the boys. Cabo San Lucas Yacht Life Boys Trip 2025. It was tagged with the location and had been posted 3 hours ago. I scrolled to the next photo. It was a picture of Richard, solo, laughing as he stood at the helm of the yacht, a bottle of what looked like very expensive tequila in his hand. The third photo was of their dinner at a beachfront restaurant, plates piled high with lobster and steak. The air left my lungs in a rush, replaced by an icy cold that started in my gut and spread through my veins. It wasn't just the lie. It was the scale of it, the casual cruelty of it. While I was at home, crying my eyes out over my dying grandmother, he was living a life of luxury he claimed we couldn't afford. The $900 for a plane ticket to see my family was irresponsible, a risk to our entire financial future. But a trip to Cabo involving yachts, champagne, and lobster. That was apparently a perfectly reasonable expense. My hands began to shake, the phone feeling heavy and toxic in my grip. I kept scrolling, my mind a maelstrom of confusion, hurt, and a burgeoning, unfamiliar rage. There were videos of them doing shots at a crowded bar, a picture of their hotel suite with an infinity pool overlooking the ocean. Greg had tagged the resort, the Cape, one of the most exclusive and expensive hotels in Cabo. A quick search confirmed a single night there cost more than the flight I had begged for. The hurt was a sharp, stabbing pain in my chest. The man I had trusted, the partner I had sacrificed for, had looked me in the eye and lied with such ease. He had used our shared finances, our future, as a weapon to deny me a final moment with the woman who meant the world to me. He had watched me grieve, offered hollow words of comfort, all while knowing he was planning this extravagant escape. But as the initial shock and pain began to subside, they were replaced by something else, something harder and colder. It was a slow-building fury, a quiet, methodical rage that settled deep within me. It wasn't the hot, explosive anger that leads to shouting matches and slammed doors. It was a glacial fury, clear and focused. The tears stopped. My breathing evened out. The shaking in my hands ceased. I took a screenshot of every single photo, every post, every tag, every comment. I saved them to a hidden folder on my phone, my movements precise and deliberate. I was no longer a grieving wife being comforted by a supportive husband. I was an archivist, and I was building a case. I was documenting the evidence of his betrayal, each image a nail in the coffin of the life we had built together. He had made his choice. He had prioritized a lavish weekend with his friends over my love for my grandmother. He had deemed my grief an inconvenience and my request an extravagance. He thought he was smart, that he had pulled it off perfectly. He had no idea who he was dealing with. He didn't know that my grandmother had taught me more than just how to bake cookies. She had taught me resilience. And he certainly didn't know that in her final days, she was about to give me the ultimate tool to reclaim my life. The cold fury inside me wasn't just anger. It was fuel, and I was about to use it to burn his world to the ground. Richard came home late Monday night, looking tanned and tired. He walked through the door with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder and a carefully constructed story on his lips. I was sitting in the living room, the lights dimmed, pretending to read a book. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my face was a placid mask of neutrality. "Hey, Nance," he said, dropping his bag with a thud. "Man, I am beat. Driving really takes it out of you." He came over and tried to kiss me, but I subtly turned my head so his lips landed on my cheek. He didn't seem to notice. The cabin was rustic, for sure. No cell service, which was kind of nice. Total detox. "How was your weekend? How's Margaret?" The ease with which the lies flowed from his mouth was astonishing. He didn't even flinch. He looked me straight in the eye, feigning concern for the very person he had prevented me from seeing. The cold fury I'd been nursing for the past 24 hours solidified into a diamond-hard certainty. This wasn't just a marriage in trouble, it was a fraud. It was quiet, I said, my voice carefully devoid of emotion. Grandma is about the same, just waiting. I'm so sorry, honey, he said, placing a hand on my knee. I wish I could have been here. Me too, I replied, the double meaning hanging in the air, completely lost on him. For the next 2 days, I played the part of the devoted wife. I listened to his fabricated stories about chopping firewood and playing poker with the guys. I nodded and smiled, all while the screenshots of him on that yacht burned a hole in my phone's digital memory. I was biding my time, waiting. I wasn't sure for what exactly, but I knew that a simple confrontation wasn't enough. Yelling and crying would give him the opportunity to twist the narrative, to apologize with crocodile tears, to make it about my emotions rather than his actions. I needed more than a confession. I needed leverage. The call came on Wednesday. It was my aunt again, her voice choked with sobs. Nancy, she's gone. She passed away an hour ago. It was peaceful. Profound, gut-wrenching grief washed over me, so powerful it almost brought me to my knees. The finality of it was suffocating. I would never hear her voice again, never feel her hand in mine. And I wasn't there. Richard's lie had stolen that from me forever. I locked myself in the bathroom and cried, mourning not just my grandmother, but the last shred of hope I had for my marriage. When I emerged, my eyes were red and swollen, but my mind was clearer than ever. The period of waiting was over. Richard performed his role as the grieving husband-in-law beautifully. He held me, whispered comforting words, and handled the logistics of calling my boss to explain my absence. He suggested we plan a memorial service here for friends who couldn't travel, a gesture that was both thoughtful and, I now knew, utterly self-serving. He was covering his tracks, reinforcing his image as a supportive partner. The day after my grandmother's death, I received another call. This time, it was from a man I didn't know, with a calm, professional voice. "Is this Nancy Miller?" he asked. "My name is Arthur Vance. I was your grandmother, Margaret Gable's attorney. I'm calling to express my deepest condolences for your loss." "Thank you," I managed to say, confused as to why he was calling me directly. "I'm also calling because your grandmother was very specific in her final instructions," he continued. "She made some significant changes to her will about a month ago. She has named you as the sole executor and the sole beneficiary of her entire estate." I sank onto the edge of the bed, the phone pressed hard against my ear. "What? Sole beneficiary? What about my mom and my aunts?" "She set up trust funds for them years ago," Mr. Vance explained gently. "She made sure everyone was taken care of, but the remainder of her assets, her business holdings, her property, and her personal investments, she has left everything to you, Nancy. Your grandmother was a very savvy woman. Her estate is considerable." He went on to explain the details, talking about numbers with so many zeros they seemed abstract and unreal. My grandmother, the woman who taught me to garden and bake, who always smelled of cinnamon and soil, had been a quiet millionaire. She had built an empire and, in her final act, she had handed it to me. "She also left a personal safe deposit box for you," Mr. Vance added. "The key is with a letter she wrote for you, which I will be sending by courier. It should arrive tomorrow. She was very insistent that you and you alone have access to it." After I hung up, I sat in stunned silence for a long time. The grief was still there, a heavy weight in my chest, but it was now intertwined with a staggering sense of shock and a dawning realization. This inheritance wasn't just money, it was power. It was independence. It was a get-out-of-jail-free card from the life Richard had so carefully curated for us, a life built on his control and his deception. The letter and the small, antique-looking brass key arrived the next morning. I waited until Richard had left for work, his parting words a reminder to take it easy today, just rest and grieve. A sentiment so dripping with hypocrisy it made my stomach turn. I tore open the envelope. Inside was my grandmother's familiar, elegant handwriting. "My dearest Nancy," the letter began. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone. Do not mourn for too long, my dear girl. I have lived a long and wonderful life, and my greatest joy was watching you grow into the incredible woman you are. I know you are strong, resourceful, and kind, but I also know that you are sometimes too trusting. I have left you everything not because I love your mother and aunts any less, but because I believe you need it the most. I have watched you dim your own light to make your husband's shine brighter. I have seen you make sacrifices I'm not certain he would ever make for you. A woman must always have her own resources, Nancy. Her own key to her own door. This inheritance is your key. Use it to build a life that is truly yours, not one where you are a supporting character in someone else's story. In the safe deposit box, you will find all the documentation you need. And perhaps a few things that will help you see the world and your life with more clarity. Be brave. I love you always. Grandma Margaret. Tears streamed down my face as I read her words. It was as if she had seen everything, had understood the dynamics of my marriage in a way I was only just beginning to. She hadn't just left me money, she had left me a mission. She had given me permission to choose myself. I clutched the small brass key in my hand. It was cold and solid, a tan. Gibble linked to her strength and foresight. The time for grieving was not over, but the time for passive acceptance was. I was no longer just Nancy, the quiet archivist. I was Margaret Gable's heir, and I had a box to open. The next day, I called my best friend, Sarah. I'd known her since college, and our friendship was one of the few unfiltered, honest things in my life. As a paralegal specializing in family law, she was pragmatic, sharp, and had a finely tuned nonsense detector. I asked her to meet me for coffee, my voice low and urgent. We met at a small cafe downtown, far from our usual neighborhood spots. I laid out the whole story, my voice a quiet, steady monotone as I recounted Richard's lie, the Instagram photos, my grandmother's death, and the shocking news of the inheritance. I showed her the screenshots on my phone. Sarah listened without interruption, her expression growing harder with each detail. When I finished, she took a long sip of her latte and set the cup down with a decisive click. "Okay," she said, her voice pure steel. "So, the lying, cheating worm is about to get what's coming to him. I'm in. What's the plan?" Her immediate, unquestioning support was like a balm on my raw nerves. "The first thing," I said, pulling the brass key from my pocket, "is to see what's in this box. My grandmother's lawyer said it would provide clarity." An hour later, we were in the sterile, silent viewing room of a downtown bank vault. The attendant placed the long, metal box on the table and left us alone. My hand trembled as I inserted the key and turned the lock. The lid opened with a soft hiss. Inside, it was meticulously organized, a testament to my grandmother's orderly mind. On top was a thick file folder. I opened it. It contained statements for investment portfolios, deeds to properties, and stock certificates. The numbers were even more staggering on paper, but tucked beneath that folder was another, slimmer one labeled for Nancy. Inside were two things. The first was a series of bank statements from an account I had never heard of, dating back 5 years. It was a joint savings account in the names of Richard Miller and his mother. I scanned the transaction history. Every month, like clockwork, a deposit of $2,000 was transferred from our joint checking account. The description read investment management fee. It was money Richard had told me he was moving into our long-term retirement portfolio. Instead, he had been funneling it into a secret account. The current balance was over $120,000. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a one-time lie about a vacation. This was a calculated, long-term financial betrayal. He had been systematically siphoning money from our shared life for half a decade. The second item in the folder was a small, bound notebook. It was my grandmother's diary. Tucked into the last few pages was a note in her familiar script. "Nancy, I suspected something was amiss a few years ago when Richard was advising me on my finances. He was too slick, too charming. A good man explains things clearly. A con man makes you feel stupid for asking questions. I hired a private investigator. The enclosed is what he found. I'm so sorry, my dear." The rest of the notebook contained the investigators' typed reports. They detailed how Richard had used marital funds to make a series of personal investments, including funding a failed tech startup run by his friend Greg. He had lost nearly $50,000 of our money and had hidden the loss completely. The report also included credit card statements from cards I didn't know he had, filled with charges for expensive dinners, golf club memberships, and even a weekend trip to a spa resort with an unidentified female companion 2 years prior. Sarah let out a low whistle. He's not just a liar, Nancy. He's a professional. He built a whole separate financial life. I felt nauseous, but the fury quickly burned away the sickness. This was the clarity my grandmother had promised. My marriage wasn't a partnership. It was a business, and I was the unwitting investor being systematically fleeced. "He's not going to get away with it," I whispered, my voice shaking with rage. "He's not getting a penny of her money. He's not getting a penny more of mine." Sarah nodded, her paralegal mind already kicking into gear. "Okay. First things first, we need to protect the inheritance. The lawyer, Arthur Vance, needs to help you set up an ironclad trust in your name only immediately, before Richard even knows it exists. Second, you need a forensic accountant. We need to trace every dollar he's moved without your consent. My firm works with a great one. Third, you need a shark of a divorce attorney. I know just the person." Over the next week, I became a quiet storm of activity. By day, I was the grieving widow's granddaughter, moving through my house like a ghost, accepting Richard's empty condolences. He was so confident in his deception, so sure of my ignorance, that he never suspected a thing. He patted my hand and told me not to worry about boring financial stuff for a while, that he would handle everything. Meanwhile, I was having discreet meetings in sterile downtown offices. I met with Arthur Vance, and we established the Margaret Gable Trust, into which the entire inheritance was transferred. It was an irrevocable trust, a financial fortress that Richard would never be able to touch. I met with the forensic accountant, a woman named Ms. Davies with eyes like a hawk and a mind like a steel trap. I handed her the contents of the safe deposit box and gave her login credentials to every account I could access. I met with the divorce lawyer, a formidable woman named Helen who looked at Richard's photo and smiled a thin, predatory smile. Ms. Davies worked quickly. Within days, she had unearthed the full extent of Richard's financial infidelity. He had a secret credit score, a secret investment portfolio, and the secret savings account with his mother was just the tip of the iceberg. He had been using our shared assets as his personal slush fund, a source of capital for his high-risk ventures and luxurious lifestyle, all while telling me we needed to cut back on groceries. The Cabo trip, she discovered, had been paid for entirely from the secret account. He had spent over $15,000 in 4 days. The cost of 17 plane tickets to see my dying grandmother. The evidence was overwhelming, a meticulously documented history of greed and deceit. Helen, my lawyer, was ecstatic. "This is what we call a slam dunk, Nancy," she said, tapping the thick file Ms. Davies had prepared. "His deliberate dissipation of marital assets gives us enormous leverage. We're not just going to divorce him, we're going to bankrupt his ego." I went home that night and looked at Richard, who was complaining about a tough day at work. I felt nothing. No love, no sadness, not even pity. I just saw a stranger, a con man who had stolen 10 years of my life, but I was about to buy them back, with interest. My grandmother had given me a key, and I had used it to unlock the truth. Now, I was going to use it to lock him out of my life forever. The 2 weeks leading up to the confrontation were the most surreal of my life. I was living a double existence. On the surface, I was Nancy Miller, grieving granddaughter and dutiful wife. I made Richard's favorite meals, asked about his day, and sat beside him on the couch watching television, feigning interest in the shows he liked. I was a ghost in my own home, an actress playing a role she had long since outgrown. Beneath the surface, however, I was an architect, meticulously designing the demolition of my old life and the foundation of my new one. Every move was calculated, every action deliberate. My grief for my grandmother was real and profound, but it had become a source of strength, a constant reminder of what was at stake. I was honoring her memory not with tears, but with action. My first move, guided by my lawyer, Helen, was to secure my own future. Using a small portion of the inheritance, I put a down payment on a small but beautiful condo in a different part of the city, a place with large windows and a view of the park. I signed the lease under my maiden name. I arranged for movers, scheduling them for the day I planned to confront Richard. Everything was being set up in the background, a new life waiting for me to step into it. Next, I methodically began to untangle my life from his. I opened new bank accounts in my name only. I had my paycheck from the archives rerouted to my new account. Guided by Sarah, I made copies of every important document in the house: our marriage certificate, tax returns, property deeds, car titles. I packed a go-bag with my passport, birth certificate, sentimental jewelry, and a change of clothes, which I stored in the trunk of my car. I was preparing for every eventuality. The forensic accountant, Ms. Davies, continued to be my greatest asset. She created a comprehensive report that was more than just numbers. It was a narrative of Richard's betrayal. It detailed every secret transfer, every hidden debt, every lavish expense. The report was my weapon, and I planned to wield it with surgical precision. During this time, Richard's arrogance was my greatest ally. He was so thoroughly convinced of my ignorance and my passive nature that he became sloppy. He left his personal laptop open one afternoon, and I found a spreadsheet titled Life 2. It was a 5-year plan that involved him leaving his job to start his own consulting firm, funded, I noted with a sickening lurch, by a windfall he anticipated from my family inheritance. He had already earmarked my grandmother's money for his own dreams, assuming it would naturally become his to manage and control. He had even budgeted for a new luxury car and a yearly European trip. Seeing my future L'd out as a line item in his budget for a life that didn't include my happiness was the final push I needed. There was no more hesitation, no more lingering doubt. He didn't see me as a partner, he saw me as a resource. My plan for the confrontation was simple, but I thought effective. I didn't want a screaming match. I didn't want a dramatic scene. I wanted to present him with the cold, hard facts in a way he couldn't deny, refute, or escape. I wanted to dismantle his world not with emotion, but with evidence. As an archivist, my entire career was about preserving truth and presenting it in an undeniable format. I decided to use those skills against him. I went to a print shop and had every single one of Greg's Instagram photos from Cabo enlarged into high-quality 8x10 prints. The picture of Richard at the helm of the yacht, the champagne toast, the lobster dinner, they were all blown up in vivid, glossy color. I then printed out the key bank statements from his secret account with his mother, highlighting the transfers from our joint account and the $15,000 in expenditures for the Cabo trip. I printed the executive summary of Ms. Davies' report, with its damning flowchart of dissipated marital assets. I bought a large, professional portfolio, the kind an artist would use. Inside, I carefully arranged the evidence. The first page was the photo of him on the yacht. The next page was the bank statement showing the cost. The next, a photo of him at the fancy dinner. The next, the corresponding credit card statement. I created a narrative of his betrayal, page by page. I called it the vacation album. The day before the confrontation, I made a quiet visit to the safe deposit box one last time. I retrieved the beautiful diamond necklace my grandmother had left me. That evening, when Richard was in the shower, I walked into our shared closet. His clothes were on the left, mine on the right. I took 3 large trash bags and systematically emptied his side. His expensive suits, his designer shirts, his collection of watches, everything went into the bags. I left them by the front door. Then I went into his home office. His desk was a monument to his ego, covered in awards and photos of him at corporate events. I took down every single one. I boxed up his personal effects, his files, his books. I left the boxes stacked neatly in the corner. I was erasing him from the house, archiving his presence before formally deleting it. When I was done, the house felt lighter, quieter. I went to bed that night not with a sense of dread, but with a feeling of calm resolve. I was not the victim in this story anymore. I was the author of its final chapter. Tomorrow, Richard wouldn't be coming home to his quiet, unassuming wife. He'd be coming home to a reckoning. The day of the confrontation, which I had mentally labeled D-Day for Divorce Day, I woke up with a strange sense of peace. I called the movers and confirmed their arrival for 3 p.m. I called Sarah, and she promised to be on standby, her phone on and ready. Then, I set the stage. I cleared the dining room table completely. In the center, I placed the portfolio I had assembled, the vacation album. Next to it, I laid out a single, neatly folded document. It was a copy of the divorce petition Helen had drawn up, citing financial fraud and dissipation of marital assets. Richard was due home at 6. At 3, the movers arrived. They were efficient and discreet, emptying my closet, my home office, and the boxes of personal items I had set aside. Within 2 hours, everything that was solely mine was on a truck, on its way to my new condo. The house now felt like a sterile hotel, a place of transient residence. The only things left of us were the shared furniture and the evidence on the dining room table. At 6:15 p.m., his car pulled into the driveway. I heard his keys in the lock, the familiar sound now sending a jolt of adrenaline through me, not fear. He walked in, whistling softly. "Hey, Nance, I'm home," he called out, his voice echoing slightly in the strangely empty hallway. He stopped short in the foyer, staring at the black trash bags full of his clothes lined up by the door. "What the? Are you cleaning out the closets? What's going on?" "We need to talk, Richard," I said. My voice was calm, almost unnervingly so. I was standing by the dining room table. "In here." He walked in, his brow furrowed in confusion. His eyes landed on the table, on the sleek black portfolio and the legal document beside it. A flicker of uncertainty, perhaps even fear, crossed his face for the first time. "What is all this?" he asked, his voice losing some of its earlier swagger. "Nancy, you're scaring me a little." "Sit down," I said. It wasn't a request. He hesitated, then slowly pulled out a chair and sat. I remained standing. I opened the portfolio. The first image was the vibrant, sun-drenched photo of him and his friends on the yacht, champagne glasses raised in a toast. His smile in the picture was wide and genuine. His smile in the room had vanished. "Tell me about the cabin," I said softly. "Was it rustic? Did you chop a lot of firewood?" Richard stared at the photo, his face paling. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief. He was scrambling, his quick mind trying to compute how this was possible. I do," he stammered. I flipped the page. It was the bank statement from his secret account with his mother, the one I wasn't supposed to know existed. I had used a highlighter to mark the withdrawals made during his trip, totaling just over $15,000. $100 weekend, I think you said. It looks like you went a little over budget." His face went from pale to ashen. "Where did you get this?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. "My grandmother was a very smart woman," I said, my voice as cold and hard as the fury that had been simmering inside me for weeks. "She believed a woman should always have her own resources. She also believed in due diligence." I flipped through the pages one by one, a silent, damning presentation. The photo of the lobster dinner, followed by the credit card statement. The photo of the luxury hotel suite, followed by the itemized bill I'd obtained. With each page, a layer of his composure peeled away. The confident consultant, the master of spreadsheets and smooth talk, was visibly crumbling. When I got to the last page of the album, a copy of his Life 2 spreadsheet where he'd planned to use my inheritance to fund his new life. A choked, guttural sound escaped his lips. "Nancy, please," he began, his voice cracking. He reached across the table, trying to take my hand. I pulled it away as if his touch was toxic. "I can explain. It was a mistake. I was stupid. I was going to tell you." "No," I cut him off, my voice sharp. "You weren't going to tell me. You were going to continue to lie, just as you have for the last 5 years, siphoning money from our life to fund yours. You stood there and told me we couldn't afford for me to see my dying grandmother. You let me sit here, consumed with guilt and grief, while you were living a life of luxury on money you stole from us." Tears started to well in his eyes. They were tears of self-pity, not remorse. "I'm so sorry, Nancy. I love you. We can fix this. I'll pay it all back. We can go to therapy." "There is no we anymore, Richard," I said, sliding the divorce petition across the table towards him. "This is the end of our partnership. Your assets have been frozen pending the divorce proceedings. My lawyer will be in touch with yours. I suggest you find one quickly. Helen is very good at what she does." He stared at the document as if it were a snake. The arrogance, the charm, it was all gone. In its place was a desperate, pathetic man who had just realized the game was over and he had lost spectacularly. "You can't do this," he pleaded. "The house, our savings, Nancy, you'll leave me with nothing." I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a near whisper, but carrying more weight than any shout. "You left me with nothing a long time ago, Richard. You left me with nothing when you chose a vacation over my family. You left me with nothing every time you lied to my face. The difference is, I can rebuild. You, on the other hand, you have a problem. You see, all that money you hid, the court calls that dissipation of marital assets. And in a divorce, that means I get a larger share of what's left to compensate for what you squandered. You didn't just lie to me. You lied to the law. You played a stupid game, and now you get your stupid prize." I stood up straight, turning to walk away. "Your clothes are by the door. The rest of your things are in boxes in your office. I'd suggest you call your mother. I think you'll be needing a place to stay." And with that, I walked out of the room, leaving him alone at the table with the glossy, colorful evidence of his downfall. I didn't look back. I walked out the front door, past the trash bags filled with Richard's life, and got into my car. I didn't speed away or slam the door. My exit was as quiet and deliberate as the rest of my plan. As I drove away from the house we had shared, the house built on a foundation of lies, I felt a profound sense of release. It wasn't triumph or joy, not yet. It was the quiet, cleansing feeling of a fever breaking. I drove to my new condo. The movers had already gone, leaving boxes neatly stacked in the clean, empty rooms. The space smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. It was smaller than the house, but it was all mine. The large living room window looked out over the park, where the last rays of sunlight were filtering through the trees. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. The divorce was as swift and brutal for Richard as my lawyer had promised. Faced with the mountain of evidence from the forensic accountant, he had no ground to stand on. His attempts to claim half of my inheritance were dismissed by the judge in a matter of minutes, thanks to the ironclad trust Arthur Vance had established. The court took a very dim view of his financial fraud. In the final settlement, I was awarded the house, which I immediately put on the market, 70% of our shared assets to compensate for the money he had hidden and squandered, and he was ordered to pay for all my legal fees. He was left with his own significant debts, a tarnished professional reputation, and the secret savings account, now severely depleted by his own legal costs. His mother had to bail him out. Sarah helped me unpack, both literally and figuratively. We spent a weekend turning the empty condo into a home, fueled by pizza and cheap wine. She let me talk for hours, processing the anger, the hurt, and the decade of my life I had given to a man who never deserved it. Her steady, no-nonsense friendship was a lifeline. A few months after the divorce was finalized, the sale of the house closed. The money went directly into the trust, adding to the legacy my grandmother had left me. It felt like the final act of closing a chapter. I didn't need the money, not really. The inheritance was more than enough to ensure I would be secure for the rest of my life. But the act of selling that house, of converting that shared and tainted space into clean, independent capital, was deeply symbolic. I kept my job at the city archives. I loved the quiet order of it, the sense of preserving history. It grounded me, but with the freedom my grandmother's gift had given me, I started a new project. I established the Margaret Gable Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to providing grants and mentorship to women starting their own small businesses. It was a fitting tribute to her, a way to use her legacy to help other women build their own independence, to have their own key to their own door. I saw Richard once about a year later. I was walking through the park across from my condo on a sunny Saturday afternoon. He was sitting on a bench, looking disheveled and much older than his years. He saw me, and for a moment our eyes met. I saw a flash of anger, then shame, then a deep, hollow sadness. I didn't feel hatred or pity. I felt nothing at all. He was just a page from a book I had already finished reading and placed back on the shelf. I gave him a small, polite nod, and I kept walking. Life is quiet now, but it's a good quiet. It's a peaceful quiet, not an empty one. My home is filled with light, my friendships are genuine, and my work is fulfilling. Sometimes, in the evening, I sit by my window and look out at the city lights, and I think of my grandmother. I think of her strength, her foresight, and her unwavering belief in me. She gave me more than an inheritance. She gave me back to myself. The fury that once burned so coldly inside me has been transformed. It's no longer a weapon, but a forge, one that burned away the life I had and tempered me into the woman I was always meant to be, strong, independent, and free. And for the first time, as the sun rises on my new life, I feel truly, completely at peace.